We're going live.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to all of you, and welcome to the Sunday Roast. And this program is brought to you under the kind auspices of the Democratic Labour Party. I'm Steve Blackett, and I'll be your moderator for this evening's program. I have with me for this edition of the Roast, we have Party Leader and Spokesperson on Finance, Verla De Peiza, First Vice President and Spokesperson on Business, Ryan Walters, Spokesperson on Health, Paul Gibson, who will join us shortly, Spokesperson on Agriculture, Andre Worrell. I want to welcome all of you, Party Leader and comrades. This evening, our focus will be on this year's estimates of expenditure 2021 to 2022, and it was titled The DLP Responds. As you may know, the estimates of expenditure related into Parliament earlier this week, and that was followed by the debate surrounding what has become known as the rail budget. This evening, we will be examining the overall financing policy of government, the revenue generating policy of the administration, how it will affect the economic sectors, will it spur growth and halt the economic bleed in the country, and will Barbadians be better off as a result of this year's estimates. We will commence this evening's program with the opening statements from our panelists, starting with our party leader, Verla De Peiza, followed by Ryan Walters and Andre Worrell. And by that time, and Paul Gibson arrives, he will then make his opening statement. I now invite you, party leader, to make your opening statement. Party leader.
Yes, right. This is the yearly exercise. Thank you very much for that. This is the yearly exercise where government allocates funds to different departments, different heads under the various ministries. And it is through this exercise that we get to understand where government places its focus and its emphasis going forward. So when we were analyzing the estimates, the appropriation bill, as it is called, and the attachments thereto, we were picking up on certain trends. And then the discussion in the House for the last week solidified in our minds that the government's direction is not one that we would go in as a party. So we had our own consultations, and we have come up with ideas that we wish for the country to study and ruminate on, so that they can have an understanding of where the Democratic Labour Party stands in relation to how we shape the economy, how we divest our finances, how we face the country, and how we make these programs with the betterment of our people at the forefront of our minds. So then this evening's program is designed to bring that to you. And understanding it can't be fully comprehensive because, of course, the estimates debate is a very long process in the House. It has already spanned 1 week, and it likely will take another as it concludes in the House and then moves to the Senate. But the heads that the government chooses to rely on is also an indicator of where their minds are at. And for us, we were noticing the exceptions rather than the rule. We didn't see anything on education being highlighted, even though we know that we are in a state of flux where that is concerned. We didn't see any major push towards agriculture. What we heard in relation to small business was not encouraging, and health, of course, has to be the COVID pandemic. And that is why we chose to start with these, but we recognize that there will be the other heads as well that we will have to have some development on. And then at the back end of it all, having discussed how we distribute the funds, we also have to have a conversation as to how we raise those funds, because we recognize a certain level of inflation in a lot of the figures that we are seeing last year over this year. And we need to have an understanding and an appreciation then going forward as to what policy is driving these decisions. And then if the Democratic Labour Party's policy is different from that, then it is an option for the people of Barbados to consider.
Okay, thank you very much, Party Leader. I now invite Ryan Walters to make your opening statements. You're all muted. You have to.
Thank you, Moderator. Good evening to my fellow panelists and to all those listening at home. As to continue from the President, where we'll start is how does the estimates address our skyrocketing unemployment in the country driven by the pandemic? You've heard that there are at least 6,000 persons knocking on the doors of our welfare department. We know that there have been massive layoffs in the tourism sector, and we know that the tourism-related businesses have also been hit very hard. So the estimates should be providing a base ground for us to get our people back out to work in the absence of the traditional sector of tourism and the fall off there of unemployment. We are aware that the government is involved in an IMF program, which ties its hand in terms of providing jobs directly through the public sector. So we were expecting to see a big thrust, a big song and dance on the policies, the direction, the vision that the government will take in terms of holding the hand of the private sector, re-energizing it, putting policies in place to help it, to encourage it to actually employ people. And on the other side, creating employment where there are persons that are home, they're skilled, they're knowledgeable, they're experienced, and they themselves might want to get into enterprise for themselves. And we would have expected to see a greater impetus put towards small business and entrepreneurship and actually doing stuff for yourself. So the basis for the estimates was quite contrary to what I just described. It was as though it's business as usual. There were no initiatives to really say that we are comfortable that in short order we can have at least 7,000 or 8,000 persons back out to work, earning an income and starting to take care of themselves and their families. To further cement that, what you have is a clear indication that the government is really not diversifying our economy. And they are not taking this opportunity to really use the knowledge base, use the skill sets, use our existing strengths that we have, which we'll outline later, and build on that. You're saying the usual business as usual. We're gonna repair some roads, we're gonna build some houses, and we're gonna be okay. But this is a far cry from where we have to be as a country, and our goal, and definitely I will try to shape out how we can actually get people back out to work, how we can actually get and stabilize our economy in the absence of tourism. And it is quite doable given the numbers that we will show as the program goes on. Thank you, Steve.
Fine, thanks so much. Andre, just unmute your microphone.
Right, thank you, Steve, and good evening to the panel and those of us watching on Facebook. Now, I cover the area, agriculture and the environment, and one of those areas was done in the heads this week during the estimates, which was an environment. I was somewhat disappointed that a major sector such as agriculture, which, as we recall from the Central Bank Governor's report at the end of 2020, was the only sector in Barbados to show growth. And at a time where the government of Barbados is looking for revenue generating avenues now that tourism has taken such a slump because of COVID, and you have thousands of Barbadians seeking employment. I would have expected that we would have seen more focus in the estimates and opportunity in the debates of the head for the Agriculture Ministry to come up. Now, I don't know if it was left out because of the number of scandals that are currently plaguing the Ministry of Agriculture in the area of the BADMC, and the way how they have booted out a retrenched worker who established a small business running the farm shop and brought in a larger conglomerate player. I don't know if the Prime Minister was trying to shield that minister from scrutiny, but I think that she needs to take that away and bring him out so that he could be scrutinized and the country could know what are the plans for agriculture and how it can be utilized to take the country forward. The next sector which was covered was the environment. And in looking at that, all I could think about was we need to really rethink this whole idea of many hands make light work, which was a slogan the Prime Minister used in terms of justifying her large cabinet, which accounts for over $6 million or more a year. And in the Ministry of Environment, you have now 4 ministers basically doing the job of one minister. And out of the discussion this week, I still did not get in my mind, or from the Minister of the Ministry of Environment, that they were ready to deal with the major environmental issues which this country will eventually face that are needed to take the country forward. I heard nothing about waste disposal in terms of moving away from the landfills. I heard nothing about recycling. I heard nothing about protecting the marine environment in terms of, because you know that you have the raw sewage still going into the sea, and we know that there's a need for a West Coast sewage treatment plant. Heard nothing about those big projects. And I heard a little talk about using packaged desalination plants when that will take care of a small portion of the water that is needed to augment the water supply. But I heard nothing about the bigger picture in terms of larger desalination plants. And all of these are projects which will be capital labor intensive and could help to put a dent in the unemployment figures which we have in this country. So I would say that more emphasis needed to be placed on those 2 ministries. I know that they haven't completed the estimates. They still have to do the second reading speeches, and the ministers will probably elaborate on that. But in particular for the Ministry of Agriculture, with a new chief agricultural officer who came in under a lot of controversy as well, this would have been a good opportunity for parliamentarians to examine her plans for the Ministry of Agriculture and how she intends to take the sector forward and make it a major revenue and earner and an agency for employment of people of Barbados. So I'm looking forward to expand more on these as we continue our discussion this evening.
Right, thank you very much, Andre. And I'm pleased to welcome to the Sunday Roast, Paul Gibson. Paul, would you make your opening remarks at this time? Paul, are you hearing me?
I am, well, first of all, I want to say that I'm very pleased that the Democratic Labour Party left systems, processes, and structures in place that was able to facilitate the handling of the COVID-19 epidemic in Barbados. As the country, I thought that, and as leaders of the country, I thought that tremendous effort was made in the establishment of Betsy Santos Lab, providing the Fred Blackman Gollop location for which is a multi-purpose facility that has certainly come to the rescue. And we have certainly, as a party, left the country in such a way that the nurses and the structures and processes were able to to come in and assist the situation with COVID. Let me be very clear that this COVID situation is no walk in the park for any government. And so it is a very hard time for everybody. It's very hard on our economy. And of course, we, the Democratic Labour Party, were looking to see exactly what pillars the government was putting in place in order to support what is happening on the ground here. So at the end of the day, I think that I'm very happy that focus and effort was placed on health, and that we are now seeing the benefit and the fruit of those investments, so that we can better manage COVID and pass the country on to the Barbados Labour Party. They've made some bungles. We've looked at the estimate, we've looked at the numbers, and I'll have some further comments in terms of what I've seen and identified a little later. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Paul. I just want to welcome those of you who are now joining on all the social media platforms to the Democratic Labour Party Sunday Roast. We're looking this evening at the estimates of expenditure for 2021 to 2022, and especially with the topic this evening of the DLP response. I just want to open the discussion now, comrades. I know, for instance, with Ryan, that to get the economy really turning over, one of the areas that we have to pay particular attention to is that of business, small business, medium-sized business, and large businesses. Now, several questions have been raised for many years about the tardiness or the sloth of our regulatory and or registering agencies and the processes by which these the regulations and registration they're done. Now, what have you heard from the minister or the officials about the proposed improvements in these areas?
Thank you, Steve. The direction for the corporate affairs, they're going to go fully digital, where you are able to register your business online. You'll be able to, it will be connected to other government agencies, and you are actually, it's supposed to be a processing of an application between 2 to 6 business hours after application. So it's going to be fully automated, they hope, by the end of the year, the financial year of next year. That aside, we have to, when we talk about small business, we have to look deeper into what is the policy and the framework to actually encourage persons to get involved above paying $104 to be a part of a system. You've heard many cries from the minister about small businesses paying NAS or contributing to NAS, and he's alluded to the fact many times that it's only a couple, you only got to sell a couple, if you're a coconut vendor, in his example, you only got to sell a couple coconuts to pay your NAS for the week or for the period. And it's a very small contribution. But the reality is that a small business person does not earn an unemployment, claim, cannot get an unemployment claim. During the lockdown, there was some relief there where there was consideration for those that were self-employed. And that was a good gesture, I must say. But the framework has still not been built out to really revamp how small business people, how micro businesses operate in this country. We have a situation where there's a lowering of corporation tax down to, I think, between 5–7%, depending on the earning capacity of the company. But then you still have personal income tax, which is way higher. So if a small business person is operating as a person with a trading name, does he have to pay the higher income tax, the personal tax, versus a lower income tax rate since he doesn't have a corporation? So there are a lot of things that have not been fleshed out because there has not been an overall policy. And we keep hearing about a policy will come, it's coming. But there's nothing to say that these are the benefits for me, for you, for your brother, for your neighbor to get involved in starting a business. And this is what the government is going to put towards your venture. They're going to ensure that you have some level of unemployment. They're going to ensure that you have some level of sickness. What is going to happen to your pension? And these are real concerns why persons turn back to traditional employment, because they look down the road as well for their future and their families, right? And those things have not been laid out. So yes, we're moving to digitization of registering the business, but there's much more to the conversation right now than simply just registering the business and saying that you are in the system. Additionally, if I may go on, the government in its estimates allocated $10 million to the small business sector. And I mean, this is really a shame. We are in the middle of a pandemic where we have thousands of people are unemployed. This government has pledged the same money that they have been pledging annually for the Trust Loan Fund. And if you understand how a Trust Loan Fund works, you can apply to get $5,000 in the first instance at an interest rate of 5%. I think you pay about $150 over 3 years. I think that's kind of the model, okay? And you're in a situation now where you have many people unemployed, some skilled, some unskilled, some entrepreneur-minded, but everybody looking to do something for themselves because they're not getting any income at all. The NIS has been exhausted and they don't have no way to turn. And the numbers are showing with the high persons turning to the welfare department. So you come as a government knowing this, and you have not provided any space, any breathing capacity for you to actually empower people to move ahead. You have an entity called the Fund Access, who on average, since 1998, they have distributed about over $68 million in loans. And they were set up to deal with micro, small, and medium-sized businesses. And they give different tiers depending on what you want to do in terms of business. The average loan dispense for them will be in the region of just over $30,000, right? So you're taking some small $5,000 chunks and hoping persons can survive on that as a business. It is a joke. So they have clearly missed the bus in terms of embracing and empowering our people, in terms of saying, listen, we know now there's an opportunity for you really to get involved and provide a service or provide a product for the market and start to build on that. So the government has missed the bus significantly. The question for small businesses is finance. How do we get money? There are young enterprising people, they are educated people, but they do not have the security or the means to actually start a business that can flourish months on, right? If you take a scenario where you give a person $5,000, depending on his situation, his rent might be $1,800 next month. So, and then he has to buy stock for the business or do whatever he's doing in the business. So by the time he does not make the sales to satisfy just even to live, how can he sustain the business, right? So the government really should be focusing on, yes, there is a need for that micro, that seed, but there is a Fund Access who has the expertise in managing credit to the small business and micro business community, and that needs to be expanded on. If we are uncomfortable with using an entity like Fund Access, we need to start to guarantee the loans to the commercial banks who have more than enough capacity in terms of making sure that businesses can have a legitimate purpose, can be funded appropriately, and more so has some longevity. Now, you have the attractiveness with the commercial banks is the commercial banks have a variety of funding mechanisms. You can have an overdraft, you can have a credit card, you can have a line of credit, you can have a direct loan, but it gives the business owner the flexibility based on his needs to tap into those sources, okay? And the bank also would have some history in terms of the relationship with the business. So if the government was to even stand in as well and secure some of the loans, some of the financing through the banks, you would see that we would be able to create entrepreneurship and we'll be able to create employment opportunities, because in more cases than one, in many cases, in 8 out of 10, a business will not run by one person. They would employ at least 2 or 3 persons along, and then you can start to get a ripple effect in the economy in terms of employment and start to address the unemployment in the country. So Steve, to start, the step has been taken is our understanding. We have to watch this how it plays out in terms of digitization, but there's so much more in terms of creating a playing field, creating an architecture for businesses to first stand on, and then be able to leverage so that they can actually move forward and have a real input in this economy.
Before we move away from you, Ryan, I know one of the initiatives that was undertaken by the administration was one of the trust loans to small entrepreneurs, new entrepreneurs. How have these loans operated? Have they had the cover that they were anticipating?
Yeah, I don't think I think the loans from the reports, they have a high default rate in terms of repayment, and the pandemic did not help, it made it worse. And it goes back to the fact that it is small funding, and you're expecting a person to live on the business, but you're only able to put a very small amount into the business. The business needs a little more cushion, and they need to have the ability to scale to meet a certain level of revenue if they're going to be sustainable. So I would say that and that's why I say we need to focus more on the small business level, where in the fund access, you have the average loan being dispersed at just over $30,000 per business, and where you can have at least 2 or 3 persons being employed in the business, which will more than enough be able to catapult and start to form employment and start to give enfranchisement to our people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much. Andre, I just want to bring you into the discussion here. You raised the question of the drama that is taking place at the BADMC with the resignation of one chairman and of course the sacking of 2 CEOs since the 2018. Has this agency that is responsible for the advancement and promotion of our local food security gone off the rails and now occupied with internal upheaval within their own management structure? Are they being sidetracked from what their main goal should be?
Yes, Steve, I think that the talk so far in the BADMC, because obviously now, just to go back, the CEO, which was just fired, only came on board in June or July last year. And before that, you would have had the chairman of the board resigning in April 2020. With that, you would have heard when the chairman of the board resigned, he spoke about issues with regard to the chicken wings contracts. And many of you know that the BADMC brought in chicken wings to supply a number of the small businesses in Barbados. And those chicken wings were actually a major revenue earner for the BADMC, because the BADMC does not really get a large subvention from government, and it uses revenue earners such as the chicken wings and the products that they sell to help to pay their salaries. Now, I believe with all of this commotion going on within the BADMC, it obviously shows that the management and the board of that entity are not necessarily gelling. And if they're not gelling, I do not see how they can possibly work in the interest of developing the agricultural sector in Barbados. Because if a CEO and a chairman could not sit down and decide and make accommodation on how best to terminate the contract of a clerical officer, it means that that CEO does not hold the confidence of the chairman of the entity. So therefore, not much that he is saying would be given much consideration. So as a result of that, and you're seeing things within the agricultural sector that shows that the BADMC is not meeting the needs of the farmers at this time. I know many farmers who are waiting, who have been calling the BADMC to be attached to their irrigation wells, and they cannot get it done, and they have been waiting for over a year. And you remember the horrible drought situation that we went through last year. And these farmers were reaching out and crying out for assistance, and the BADMC was not able to assist. In fact, they're even asking persons if they could pay to run the lines themselves, get a private entity to come in to run the lines themselves. Now, these are persons who were retrenched, and they got a piece of land that they're now trying to set up into agriculture, and they're probably spending the last cent that they got in terms of getting the infrastructure there, and the BADMC is asking them to go a little bit further and pay for the irrigation, the pipelines, and so forth, and then we will just come and attach you because we do not have the capacity right now to accommodate the persons. I have not seen any additional money being voted in the estimates to the BADMC of any significance to say that they are ready to meet the growing need of farmers out there and offering assistance. Last year, when we had the drought, I will go back to that again. In Jamaica, they've organized a program where they have supplied the farmers with the water tanks and the irrigation lines so that they will be able to have water in their fields during a drought period. Nothing so was done through the Ministry of Agriculture last year, and that would have helped tremendously to help a number of farmers who lost a lot of crops due to the drought or could not do anything due to the drought. So we need to get to the bottom of what is the real problem at the BADMC. I am told that in 2018, they would have severed quite a bit of staff, nearly about 40 persons or so. But since then, I have been told that the numbers keep creeping in terms of the employment numbers. So you have to ask the BADMC, what is their wage bill now compared to 2018? Have you surpassed the wage bill of 2018? Have you brought on more people than you actually sent off to bring down the wage bill in 2018? All of these are things that are happening. And it's not happening to increase production in agriculture, but is being done for political gains because you have to find jobs for a friend. You have to, and that seems to be culture at the BADMC at this time. And not only find jobs for a friend, but you also have to facilitate big business in Barbados because the chicken wings were ended to the benefit of the larger producers of chicken in Barbados. Chicken wings do not take away from the chicken sales in Barbados because you can't give anybody in Barbados chicken as a meal on a Sunday. A chicken wing is a snack, which the vendors use when your bars are open and stuff like that. A chicken wing is a snack and persons use it for that purpose. So the chicken wings do not in any way affect the sale of whole chickens in Barbados. But that would stop to take away business from a number of small businesses who would go to that. And now, instead of being able to go to the BADMC to get the chicken wings, you have to go to the larger distributors in Barbados and purchase the chicken wings at a higher price. So nothing about that was done to save agriculture. Nothing about that was done to help small business. You're just seeing the small business people being taken advantage to. And then you have the issue now with the farm shop at the BADMC, which was being operated by a retrenched worker who managed the shop before. A retrenched worker who managed the shop before. So when she was sent home in 2018, they put out to tender at that time under the chairmanship of Wood for persons to run the shop. And she was one of the persons who was given the opportunity. They asked the BAS if they were interested. They did not take it up at the time. They asked Farmers Cooperative if they were interested. They did not take it up at the time. And the opportunity was given to her mid-2019 to operate that shop, which is a good thing because the Prime Minister promised retrenched workers that she would offer them hope by allowing them to establish small businesses. So that was a good thing. Now to hear just a few weeks ago that that particular worker, because she ran into difficulty during the COVID lockdown, every small business in Barbados had difficulty paying their bills and paying rent and stuff like that because the money coming in was less. But because she ran into difficulty with her rent, they took the shop from her and they have now given it to a large conglomerate in Barbados. And the news is all about there. So I'm just asking the Minister of Agriculture to come to the people of Barbados to confirm whether or not Massey will now be running the farm shop and to justify why it was taken from a small retrenched worker to give to a large conglomerate who has a number of outlets across Barbados where they can sell. What difference would that farm shop make to Massey at this thing? But I think it would help that small worker more than it would help Massey. Because when money that she makes, she will put back into the economy. Money that Massey makes, they will put back into their bank account. And Massey is no longer a Barbadian company. At some point in time, it will be shipped off to Trinidad or wherever. But money that small businesses make in Barbados are more than likely going to revolve throughout Barbados. So we need to find out from the Minister of Agriculture what is really going on within his ministry, because we're also hearing talk about other agencies in agriculture where managers are under threat by the same board. What is happening here in Barbados at this time? Are we looking to develop small businesses in Barbados, or are we looking to carve out all of the government agencies and put them in the hands of big business in Barbados? So I was hoping that the Minister of Agriculture would come to the people of Barbados and defend his stewardship of his ministry. So no, all is not well at the BADNC, and all is not well with agriculture in Barbados because of the chaos which is going on. And we need to hear the minister speak about it, and we need to hear the chairman of the board speak about it and not run from the journalists and try to hide it. These are taxpayers' dollars that we need to be concerned about. And there's far too much unemployment in Barbados and hardship for things like that to go under the radar.
Thank you very much, Andre. Madam Party Leader, the question that Andre raised about disadvantaging a small business person provides an excellent opportunity and a segue into the question of the party overall moving as a policy towards economic enfranchisement and empowerment. I don't know if you would have addressed your mind at this stage to implementing or formulating a program that would inform a future Democratic Labour Party government about seriously looking at the question of economic enfranchisement and economic empowerment. Successive administrations have spoken about this matter and attempted in some ways to implement it over the years, but I don't think we have been successful in really implementing and kickstarting this particular endeavor. Well, what are your thoughts on this?
Thank you, Steve. Well, the first thing is that diversifying of an economy is an exercise that is best undertaken when an economy is booming. We haven't had real boom for a long time. The last 3 years of the last Democratic Labour Party administration had growth, 2015, 2016, 2017, but it really was negligible growth. It was on the right side of zero, but it wasn't a lot. And then following the purposeful default of this current administration, the years 2018 and 2019 actually registered declines. We could very possibly, on the definition of a recession, claim that we were in recession before COVID. And then of course the situation is exacerbated by COVID. But from January last year, the Aerobar Memorial Lecture, we framed out a program that was designed to enfranchise Barbadians. The recognition that a very small percent, the current terminology is a 1%, and that is an actuality in Barbados, that the majority of revenue generation in the private sector goes towards a very small majority of our people. And what it then makes is the rest of us servants of them. Whereas we see, first of all, that the history of the Democratic Labour Party is that it not only championed the middle class, but that it developed the middle class. And we're very interested in continuing that development. There has been some slide in the last 2 years where we keep seeing that the same players come to the fore all of the time, and the same people are getting the opportunities. And we're finding that our people remain in this cycle from generation to generation of serving other people. And it is what Ryan speaks about in terms of enfranchising small business, with the intention that a small business will eventually grow and become a medium-sized business, and then face the country, face the region as a much larger business if it is given the space to grow. And it is, when we speak about small business, we're speaking in generalities, but there's synergy with agriculture and the program that Andre has in mind, where we can have the monetizing, not just the feeding of our people, but the development of industries coming out of agriculture. We see it as well as a party in relation to the arts. One of the last things that we did in late 2017, early 2018, I beg your pardon, was the Cultural Industries Development Act, which was designed to create more economic space in a different direction from what we were accustomed to doing. And when we speak about the cultural industries, we're not just talking about singing and calypso and what happens at crop over time, but we're talking about the very same agricultural side products, the development of manufacturing coming out of that. So we are looking at it as narrowly as possible and then as broadly. So we're having a focus on building out the economy and giving options via entrepreneurship, but then having that span in as many directions as possible. Like, I see it as limitless, because in all the conversation about small business, and we're talking about agriculture, we still haven't spoken about how the alternate energy can create space in our economy as well for small businesses. We haven't spoken about how technology and technological advancements, and I'm not talking about putting Kaipo online, that is 20th century business. We are now in the 21st century, and we really have to be thinking along those lines and positioning Barbados in a way that our people can be major players, not just a one person, but that it becomes a mindset for our people. And the intention of the Democratic Labour Party is to move Barbados in that direction. And we're not satisfied that we're seeing that coming out of the present administration, because you can test the seriousness by where the money is put. Literally put the money where your mouth is. And we're not seeing that the cultural industries are being respected. I noted the figure from the estimates for creative initiatives was $260,000 for a whole year. That is chicken feed. Agriculture has not been given the respect. It was the one industry, the one portfolio that showed growth, notwithstanding COVID. And we don't see the respect being given to it in terms of the money. When we were shaping out for tourism, and we should, it is not that we are abandoning tourism, is that we are recognizing that we are in a space where tourism cannot be our driving force, and using the opportunity to build out other industries. but we threw a washpan of money at tourism. They weren't even grateful. They're picking it up in dribs and drabs because they don't want to give the commitments that were required of them in order to secure their piece of the $300 billion, and then absolute chicken feed to small business. So we see where the focus and the emphasis is, and what to our minds it demonstrates is a holding pattern. This administration is spinning top, waiting for COVID to lift to get back to business as usual, whereas the Democratic Labour Party is seeing COVID as the prime opportunity to move our people forward in other directions, and using the space that the tourism slump has given us to put the money in that direction. $300 million could give $1 million to 300 small businesses to allow them to position themselves in a meaningful way, not just in Barbados, but in the region. And some of them would even make themselves international if given that capital, because they need that push. I'm backing Ryan on this. They have to be capitalized. We don't see anywhere in the estimates for any preparation for venture capital, because $5,000 as a startup does nothing for a small business. And then what is required in order to reach to the 30,000 is more than a lot of them can manage on their own. But there's nothing, no program, no policy to match their thought process, what their vision is, with the people who have the deep pockets, so that you can have working together to develop out other industries. And I just mentioned a few, but we really have to be using the opportunity. Don't see COVID only in a negative light, but see it as an opportunity to present a different face to Barbados, to present our people with options that allow them to move themselves and their families forward. And that really is the focus of the Democratic Labour Party, to get people thinking differently in what is most assuredly a different environment, so that we're not just throwing $12 million at NCF when we don't even know if NCF is going to be able to pull off crop over this year, and when the 9.9 million from last year must still be there. So we see that there's money allocated in traditional ways, but we're not seeing that this administration is allowing our people the opportunity to raise themselves up, given assistance from government.
Staying with you, party leader, the government has recently advanced a very ambitious plan, or plans for 2021 to 2022. There's some increased physical infrastructural work going on. There's road building all over the place. If you stay too long in one place, I believe your feet will be barber greened. Buildings are being refurbished. And after 3 years, a 3-year hiatus, they're now embarked on some housing programs. And this time, 3 years into the Democratic Labour Party's tenure, we had Valerie and Country Park Towers and Stuart Lodge already built. That they're now getting the housing program started. Now they've borrowed close to $1 billion, I understand, last year alone from the international lending agencies. Tax revenues are down, and tourism, of course, our main revenue earner, is in a state of collapse. How will we pay for all of these things in this financial year?
This is the thing. I also took a note because my mind was going in that direction as well. The IMF so far has disbursed 97 million and 368 million, IADB 400 million, CAF 200 million, CDB has given as well, to a total as of January of 2.7 billion, which we say we have in reserves. And that is fine if it is that we were earning it. But because we're not earning it, the only other way that we are getting this money is by way of borrowing. And it wasn't last week, because last week was estimates. Week before, in the House, the Attorney General gave notice of yet another loan, which he says is for the purpose of COVID expenses, which are unusual expenses that we weren't expecting. But we have shored up these reserves in a significant way. 35 weeks they keep boasting, which is about double the average and the standard internationally. And there's no indication as to whether any of these are policy loans, so they can apply them as they see fit, including to COVID, but instead they're borrowing again. What that means is at some point in time, there has to be a payday. What it also means is if our revenues are down and we have to pay, that there is austerity somewhere in our future. Now, what the other expenditure means, starting a housing program in year 3, paving roads at a furious pace, what those indicate is that an election is in the offing. But I don't think that we should, especially in our present climate, be using our finances in that manner. The resurfacing of roads does not bring any additional employment because they're using established companies that have their workforce already. And we're hearing, and I have to mention this, that as far as housing is concerned, that projects are being allocated in precisely the way they complained of when they were in opposition, and using the exception in order to allocate contracts. And we have to be mindful, though, that we're in quite a different space right now in terms of our economic development. So whilst a housing program will give short-term employment because they're not building, it's not major construction, it's a housing program that is going on, and it will bring some labor for the time being, and it will bring housing solutions. The method of building that they are advocating, they're not going up, they're going across. So it is going to be more land intensive than, say, Valerie or Country Park Towers. And that means that there are less people that they will be able to accommodate. Elections are coming up, this much is clear. I don't know that they will finish the houses in time to put people in them, but the emphasis is on shoring up for elections as opposed to having a longer vision for our country and making economic space for our people to be able to develop themselves. And what it is a short-sightedness. But then if after 3 years, we still haven't had any articulation of policy, either before COVID or during COVID, or any vision for Barbados past COVID, then it is not surprising that their only focus and aim is to secure elections, because it is not about securing the people of Barbados, which really is the focus of the Democratic Labour Party. We play the long game. We want to secure our people. We want to give our people options. We don't want just to be putting a berry in the pocket every 5 years or whatever time period it is that elections fall at. That, to my mind, is doing the country a disservice and does not allow us to progress at the pace that we could, because we are diverting funds that we could use for the development of our people and our country for short-term gains.
Right, thank you very much, madam. Paul, you've been shadowing now the Ministry of Health for quite a while. I believe that you're so seasoned in that ministry as the shadow minister or the spokesperson for health that you can easily slide into Colonel Bostic's seat and not a wrinkle would occur. You're hearing me, Paul? I don't think Paul is hearing me.
Yes, I can hear you.
You can hear me, fine.
I can hear you.
Right, right. I said that you were shadowing the Ministry of Health for a while now, that you could easily slide into the ministry seat and not a wrinkle would occur. Now, in this year's estimates, there has been some increase to the budget, to the estimates of the Ministry of Health, some 250 million, am I correct? Has been allocated to the Ministry of Health. They've also spoken glowingly of the health levy. It is now reckoning close to $50 million a month. From where you sit, is the health, is the Ministry of Health being adequately funded?
One of the things that I am particularly concerned about is that with the high level of unemployment that we have, which is almost 50%, that would, of course, affect the offerings happening with the NIS, where there's exponentially decrease. And so that levy will not be raking in as much money as it has been in the past. We're not sure when we'll get back up to reasonable levels of unemployment. Yeah, but that is another conversation. What I'm particularly concerned about is that some of the objectives stated by in this document, and they have something here called a special objective, which says they intend to ease the burden on the E&A department and reduce the waiting times for healthcare delivery within government. And this is a plausible and reasonable objective. However, when you look now at the numbers in the estimates, what you are seeing is that you have a E&A department that is being built out.
We've lost Paul. So maybe let's, while he regains his connectivity, let's remind first of all, or
branching a bigger A&E department where you have an even greater throughput in that department, but the exit from the A&E department remains the same size, which means that people would still will be seen faster, but will probably still spend as much time in the A&E department because there's no space on the wards. And what we did not see was a budget to increase medical wards and so on in the QEH hospital. Now that is a big concern because you will have a lot of frustrated Barbadians in society because the same length of time almost will be expected if they do not look at offering different wards to take Barbadians out of the A&E department because they'll be seen. But the question is, how long now will they spend in the A&E department? The second matter of significant concern in terms of the estimates and the spend and the allocation of the funds is that the fourth special objective says that they're going to make the polyclinics the first point of contact for the healthcare system. Now, again, a very plausible objective, but we have to be very real in the context of what's happening in Barbados. What has happened is that the Democratic Party left a very good system of health in place. The Barbados Party has come in and said that they want to have 24-hour systems. They got one established. They had a lot of challenges with nurses and the nursing complement because there were not enough nurses in Barbados. And nurses continue to leave Barbados to go to other jurisdictions. We also had a situation where they got nurses coming in from Ghana, and that's good, that's fine. Now, they are attempting to open a second polyclinic, which is at St. John, 24 hours of 24-hour polyclinic. What the issue is here is that if you are going to make an objective to have the polyclinics being the first point of contact, it must be that you must look at diagnostic testing, you must look at facility management, you must look at all these things if you are going to make it the first point of contact. We are even having difficulty with people getting dressings, being able to be seen, doctors when they are unable to come to work, patients' appointments have to be canceled and so on. And so if you are going to make the polyclinics the first point of contact, which is a good thing, it must be that you must put the money behind your words. There must be enough medical supplies and there must be enough equipment to be used in those circumstances. We are not seeing that in the estimates. There must be enough manpower to man those services and to have enough nursing capacity to take care of Barbadians in an adequate way to do dressings and not give them the packs to take home to do dressings. And so if the Barbados Labour Party is serious about making the polyclinics the first point of contact, there is a lot of work that needs to be done, but there needs to be money allocated to those areas. And so These are some of the concerns that are emanating from when a review of the estimates. We want to make sure that Barbadians are not frustrated. And because a lot of them are frustrated with the long waits to get onto the wards. A lot of them are frustrated with the long waits at the polyclinic. So before you implement and say that you want to make it the first point of call, you have to ensure that you have the capacity to do it effectively. The other concern that, of course, that emerges from the estimates is, and we're talking money here on what they're budgeting for, is this matter of hazard pay. No, the Ministry of Health has paid the persons that work in that building and the Ministry of Health hazard pay. They did it on the Jim Screechy, they did it on the down low. The hospital was able to provide hazard pay for their staff. That's good. But you have nurses at the polyclinics. You have pharmacists and medical records technologists and personnel, the maids and so on, who are up front and center with COVID. And you're going to tell me that you cannot even factor in a hazard pay in this estimate? You know, to me, it is taking the nurses and the staff for granted. We had a situation during COVID, where nurses were on strike for hazard pay in the middle of the COVID pandemic. But the minister could easily have given those ladies and gentlemen hazard pay, because he already did it for the persons in the Ministry of Health building. He did it for the QEH, and those frontline hardworking members should also be considered, and it should have been factored in the estimates. This remains a significant concern, and sometimes I think that they're really dropping the ball on these matters. We also see that we have we celebrated the month of disability this month, and we're celebrating disability, but we're taking away $400,000 from the disabled. I mean, what is that? Yeah. So I am very concerned that that there needs to be a level of seriousness about these expressions and these promises being made by the government. And we need to stop the smoke and mirrors and just get back to serving the people of Barbados in a reasonable fashion. And these are some of the discoveries, and when we pull the curtain, these are some of the things that we're seeing behind the curtain that are not coming out in the estimates. It's very important.
Thank you very much, Paul. Before we continue, let me welcome all those who are just joining us on all the social media platforms to the DLP Sunday Roast. We're discussing this evening the estimates of expenditure for 2021-2022, and today's theme is the DLP response. Now, Ryan, I want to bring you back into the discussion. We're hearing some concessions and incentives, especially in the manufacturing sector, will soon be a thing of the past. Where does this sector turn to for support needed to promote entrepreneurship in Barbados?
Hey, Steve. It's funny, the Minister of Trade, of Industry, he said that the incentives, I have it here. He says concessions, incentives, and technical assistance will be a thing of the past. You are speaking of the opportunity, and then on the other hand, you're speaking of increasing our capacity, expanding our exportable products, saving costs, using clusters and so forth, so that we can fill a gap and increase our export potential and our income earning capacity. Now, a point was made during the debate that it would be very challenging to encourage persons into the manufacturing sector to be export oriented without holding their hands in the first instance. The minister cannot explain how he could cut incentives, concessions, and support, but still want to get new people into and to fill the gap, the capacity gap. Now, if you're talking about that, you're probably speaking of encouraging only big businesses that have the wherewithal to be able to satisfy that gap. It was also noted that I think 25 exporters account for 80% of the certified exports. So you're talking about a very small pool of persons who are really carrying the export for the country. And again, these are probably bigger players in the market. So again, there's nothing for the small man. There's nothing for the guy that wants to decide that he wants to get involved in manufacturing, even as import substitution, and not necessarily to export, but to meet some local demand, which will inadvertently reduce our foreign exchange because we wouldn't have to send it out to get it anymore, right? So there's a combination of things that need to be worked on, which is how does the manufacturing sector increase exports, but how do they also decrease imports by import substitution? And this is where you can get a lot of smaller players coming in to fill some of the import substitution gaps that we have and save us foreign exchange. But to say that those days are gone, it is really, again, a slap in the face for entrepreneurs, especially at a small level, even a medium level, to come in and to take that burden to help the economy, yes, helping themselves, but to help the economy play a part in being the engine of growth, but yet they're left to fend for themselves.
Okay, Andre, the discussion on the environment and the blue economy at one time was pitched at such a height that we were discussing climate change, the green economy, waste disposal, and we had in those days when Minister Lowe was in charge of the ministry, we were talking intelligently and scholarly on these subjects. And nowadays, the environment seems to have been reduced to clearing Waterford Bottom and planting 1 million trees and those kind of frivolities. Where are we going with the question and the discussion, the intelligent discussion on the environment? Now, I heard from a reliable source, I don't know if you paid a visit to the Graham Hall Swamp, but I understand the Graham Hall Swamp is a mess with all kind of feces being poured into the Graham Hall Swamp almost on a daily basis, killing all the fauna and flora in that Graham Hall Swamp. Where are we going with environment in Barbados?
Well, thank you very much, Steve, for raising that. Now, I must say that the environment head was discussed this week last week in the House. And like you said, you just heard a lot about the beautification part of it and in terms of tree trimmings and cultivation and so forth. But the larger environmental issues in Barbados, I'm not hearing much discussion on. Those large environmental issues would be waste disposal, because the landfill will soon need another area. We are not hearing about waste to energy plants. We are not hearing about the Sanitation Service Authority, whether or not they brought in the new trucks, and which we are all thankful for, because we are getting a better collection of the garbage. But when will sanitation be moving to encouraging us to sort our garbage from source so that they can focus more on recycling? Now, the next area, Graham Hall, yes, that is an issue, because you know that we have not yet fixed the problem with the South Coast Sewage Project. We just introduced a temporary measure which is working, but the sewage is still being pumped into Graham Hall, which is the overflow for the South Coast Sewage Treatment Plant. And then you also have the exit out into the sea. You need to talk about the upgrading of the South Sewage Project to develop a tertiary plant. And then you also have to dig up that area and find all of the areas where there may be the leaking pipes and actually put in new pipes throughout the whole South Coast area. You're not hearing that conversation. So, and these things, if we don't pay attention to it, it would impact on our marine environment, and it would also impact on our tourism sector as well. Another thing that we have not heard about, before we left office in 2018, we had discussion about a West Coast sewage treatment plant, because that is needed for the West Coast as well. Right now, with all of the hotels and the development along the West Coast, the Gold Coast, that sewage is still going into the sea and damaging the coral reefs in that area. I am disappointed that the government has taken this opportunity to repair the West Coast Road, because that is not going to be an easy area to work on. But they're doing it without any consideration for developing the West Coast sewage treatment plant in terms of putting the infrastructure there that those sewage lines can go in. So all that would happen now is that you will get a lovely paved road on the West Coast. And then in another 2 years, when they finally decide, well, we are going to invest in a sewage treatment plant for the West Coast, you have to dig up that road again and start fresh. And I'm certain that that is a waste of taxpayers' money, doing a job which you could have started now and put the infrastructural work in place to get that done. And we really need to have more focused attention on our environment and stop hiding things, because we're not seeing the South Coast Sewage Project being done. This is a labor-intensive project that would definitely help to stimulate the economy and get thousands of persons who lost jobs in the hotel sector employed in those projects. Another area of our environment that we are not hearing about, which comes under the climate change heading, is water. We still have areas in the north of Barbados who are having difficulty with access to water, St. Lucie, St. Peter, parts of St. Thomas, because even during the estimates this week, the MP for St. James Central talk about the problem in the Redmond Village area and Welch's area, an area that regardless of what time of the year it is, always have difficulty with water. And the only way that you will be able to supply all of the water that we need is if we put large desalination plants to the tune of what is on the Spring Garden. In other areas of Barbados, like the southeast of Barbados, would need a large desalination plant. Not just the packaged desalination plant, which they spoke about implementing, which would only add about 500,000 gallons a day. You need something that would put at least 3 million gallons a day into the pipelines in Barbados, so that all throughout Barbados, persons would have an adequate supply of water. Because the water is critical to businesses, to the households, to agricultural production, everything. So we're not hearing the Ministry of Agriculture, Environment speaking of those issues. And I'm thinking that where the Prime Minister said, many hands make light work, the reason that you may not be getting that done now is because you have 4 ministers who are doing the job where one used to do it. Now, in the 2018-2019 budget, Minister Lowe alone handled a budget of over $101 million. Now today, you have the Ministry of the Environment and Natural Beautification with a budget of $43 million. The bulk of that, $24 million, goes to NCC. You have the Minister of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy with a budget of $19 million. 4.4 million goes to the preservation and conservation of the marine environment. Part of that also comes under the Ministry of Environment and Natural Beautification, because now this is a problem that you have with the splitting up of the ministries. NCC had the responsibility before for the marine environment, because you know that there are things such as the Folkestone Marine Park. NCC had boats which the persons who worked in that department used in order to go out and to survey the marine environment and make sure that and do studies and things are done. I understand when the ministries were carved up in that way, the persons who are in that environment, they're still on NCC, they're not necessarily under the blue economy. And then the issue of the boats is a problem. So I would want to find out from both the Minister of the Maritime Affairs and the Blue Economy and the Minister of Environment and Natural Beautification, if they have worked out how they are going to treat to those persons who worked in NCC, who have the responsibility for the marine environment, and also treat to the equipment that they have. Because I understand that the persons are there, but they don't have the boats that they can go to do the jobs that they're supposed to be doing. So correct me if I'm wrong. What I would suggest to the Prime Minister, because in this day and age where so many persons are unemployed, we need the many hands outside, not in the cabinet, but outside in Barbados in the productive sector. And if she is looking for ways of employing persons, here's a suggestion. The salary of a minister could possibly pay one person in a household roughly $1,600 a month. You could pay 10 households with the salary of one minister. Now you have 4 ministers doing the job of one. You have Kirk Humphrey, you have Adrian Ford, Environment and Blue Economy. You also have Charles Griffith and Ian Gooden-Edgell, who take care of the water and the drainage component, which all used to be in one ministry before. So pick any one of the 3 of them or 2 and send them home, because really and truly they're doing jobs week on, week off. They have a $19 million ministry and a $43 million ministry. That's basically saying that a minister is being employed for a week on, week off job, and he's getting a full salary. And consider that you would be able to employ at least 10 persons in 10 households across Barbados and put them into productive sectors. And if you do that, if you consolidate the Ministry of Environment under one ministry, then we will have the conversations necessary to take dealing with the challenges in the environment, because it is one minister who will be dealing with that, who will be able to speak to waste disposal, who would be able to speak to our marine environment, who will be able to speak to water, who will be able to speak to the issues of climate change. You'll be giving him a full-time job to keep him busy. And at the same time, with the money that you save by shedding some of those unnecessary ministers, you would have employed about 40 persons in Barbados, 40 households across Barbados. That is what is more important. Divert some of that money to people to work in the fields, to pick the cotton, to develop the agricultural sector. Divert some of that money to industries that can actually earn revenue. Divert some of that money to areas where we can actually start recycling in Barbados with collection from the source, recycling and composting, all of those things that would help us to develop a sustainable economy and a sustainable environment as well. So you're very correct. We have not been hearing the hard-hitting topics and the topics that would really make a difference to Barbados. And I hope that they're not kicking the can down the road, because all that would lead to is that in a few years, we will have an environmental catastrophe in Barbados. When the visitors are able to come back, the reefs have been degraded because we're not necessarily treating the waste going into the sea, or the water quality may not be at the level of which it should be. Or you have to place persons in a situation where you have to dig up roads which you have just repaired to put in a sewage treatment plant. We need to see a more holistic approach to development of this country and really dealing with the issues, and not just focusing on the election timeline and also giving out jobs to buddies and to friends and to paying back the persons who have been financing your election campaign. We need to seriously, this is our country, we can't leave and go anywhere, so we need to protect this environment. And we need to do the things which are necessary to make sure that we have a clean and healthy, sustainable environment in Barbados. So far, some of them, they're doing half-day jobs. Week on, week off, get rid of some of them and put the many hands in the productive sectors to work, not in the cabinet.
Excellent comments, Andre. Excellent. Madam Party Leader, in the last administration, we had some far-reaching and ambitious poverty alleviation eradication programs. I can think of the Icy Bridge program, which was an adaptation of the Chilean Puente program, where it targeted what we know in Barbados as intergenerational poverty. And we addressed it frontally. We organized a program that would get to the heart of that sector in our society. In every community, we know families who would have been affected by what we call intergenerational poverty, where the great grandparent was poor, the grandparent was, and the current generation, they still find themselves wallowing in abject poverty. We had the poverty alleviation program in the Ministry of Social Care. And before I left the ministry, Minister Sink and myself, we signed on to an IDB program called the Strengthening Program, which was a IDB program that was financed by a $10 million loan from the IDB. Poverty alleviation in Barbados seemed now to come down to the distribution of care packs, which would last probably about 2 weeks, if so long. We've had increased homelessness in Barbados, and we're also seeing a number of women now joining the homeless in Barbados along with their children. This is a dire situation. Now, the question I want to put to you, Madam Party Leader, is the welfare state being rolled back and being almost coming to nothing in Barbados?
Thank you, Steve. The short answer is yes, and then we have to demonstrate why we think so. We had, during the estimates debate in this past week, we had consideration of transport, and we heard the minister say that the government is easing itself out of transport and they're looking to privatize transport, which is in direct opposition to what the present Prime Minister said when she was in opposition at their very last annual conference before elections, annual conference of 2017. She is reported to have promised that transport will not be privatized. Recall that at the time, the Democratic Labour Party had the TASI program, which was bringing private owners into the transport system to run simultaneously, if not concurrently, so that they were on the same timetable as the government buses, and we were castigated for that. Of course, they came in with TAPS, which is a similar program. It's not identical, but a similar program. But then they invested in rolling stock and ridiculed the last administration for not investing in rolling stock. And they brought in the lovely new buses from with the electrical engines. So if you're investing in buses, why are you then 1 year later speaking about moving government away from transport? And then we have to consider the reasons why transport remained with government in large measure. It is not that there was not any injection or interjection by private transporters, but the long haul, non-productive, can't make $1 off of them routes like St. Lucie, like St. John, like far reaches of St. Philip, will not be serviced in the same way as the shorter routes like Deacons, like UE, going in that direction. We have to be reasonable in our consideration of our people in everything. It is not just about catching at a dollar, but to allow our people to be able to catch at their dollar. We have to see what is in it for our people. So when we speak about privatizing transport in its entirety, we are not considering how many buses it takes for someone from the country to get to town or get to their job. We are not considering that all trips are not equal, but we make them equal in order to create an equation for all of our people. How is that going to be regularized and rationalized in a fully privatized environment? And we speak also in relation to health. We've seen that we now have a health levy, and they're singing the song of praises as to how much has been garnered from that levy so far. But then alongside that, we have the present leader of the opposition maintaining that the current model for health is unsustainable. And we didn't get any pushback coming from the minister to suggest that he is wrong. And we watched what is happening in education, where despite all the indicators that we are now dealing with an anachronism where education is concerned, there's a reluctance to move forward in terms of any rationalization, if not total ending of education. And then on top of that, we look in the budget and we see what has been allocated to the Ministry of People Empowerment, which to my mind is a misnomer, because nothing in the programs coming out of that ministry are designed to empower. They're designed to give handouts, but this is not the point that we have reached where we are looking for handouts. It is what Ryan said last week, quoting a very popular saying, but which has now become just so much words, but no meaning. You give a man a fish, he'll eat today. You teach him to fish, he'll feed his family. We're not looking at that. The focus in the Ministry of People Empowerment is given a budget of $3 million. And when you consider, first of all, our base level of poverty, and then superimpose on that those who have become impoverished because of COVID, they have lost their jobs, their family members have lost their jobs. We are reading almost on a weekly basis of entire families being dispossessed because they cannot finance a household anymore. So they're losing their jobs, and following on immediately after is losing their homes. Their children are being disadvantaged. Everybody being put out by COVID on top of those who were already struggling in our system. And we don't see any budget poverty alleviation, no noticeable increase for this year. The budget for constituency empowerment, we don't know what happened with that last year, but it's definitely been put on hold for this year. So we can't even get in on the ground. When we had the constituency councils, we were able to deal at the community level with those interventions. And matter of fact, the small assistance that the Democratic Labour Party was allowed to have in relation to the care packages, we were able to distribute quickly because we could tap into our sources and resources in relation to the constituency councils and the information that we still possessed where that was concerned, to deal with the pockets of abject need. And we're not seeing that we are having any crafting of a policy that deals the Icy Bridge project. We're not seeing anything that has those linkages to allow people to raise themselves up, to break that cycle of the intergenerational poverty. We're not having those moments where we are getting the sense that there is any consideration being given to how we as a government service our people, because that really is what the focus is of government. We are here to serve our people. We are here not to give them handouts, but to give them the hand up. We should be looking in a ministry that styles itself as one for people empowerment at ways and means of getting people to move to another step from where they are right now. And then on a national level across all of the other ministries, the ones that I just singled out. We should be looking to have a welfare system, not welfare in terms of those who are falling through the cracks, but in terms of that blanket of coverage that any social democracy should be considering: transport and health and education, the bedrocks and the pillars of a small society that is developing itself. We are actually seeing these being rolled back, some gradually, some much faster than that, and the signals are being sent that this present administration does not deem our welfare state, our social structure, to be important. We were ridiculed for speaking it in our mantra that we are more than an economy, we are a society, but they are demonstrating their disregard for our people, social well-being, by the very programs that they refuse to put in place, and how we see these estimates being structured. Certainly for the coming year, there is no contemplation by the present administration to be raising its people up out of poverty, and that is a disgrace.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You're listening to the Democratic Labour Party Sunday Roast. We will focus in this evening on the estimates of expenditure for 2021-2022 under the theme, the DLP response. Ryan, I'll bring you back into the discussion now. Happily, we have been removed from the blacklisting, but we are still on the grey list and we're being watched with an eagle's eye. How comfortable are you with this revised status?
Hi, Steve, thank you. Blacklisting. All right, this is the position. Huh? The goalpost, it is said that the goalpost is always changing with the EU and the requirements and so forth in terms of being compliant. What you found in the estimates, the numbers in terms of consulting fees and professional fees to support, I believe, what would be making sure that we remain compliant and so forth. In 2019, you had $1.2 million. In 2020, you had 2.5 million, which is double, which suggests obviously they were trying to grapple with the issues in terms of the blacklisting and so forth. But now in 2021, you're down to $44,000, right? So it is a feel good, relax until the next situation or problem arises. And that is not the way that we should be running this ministry. I want to draw the panel's attention and the listeners' attention to the fact that corporation taxes is the only line item in the revenue that actually increased last year. Corporation taxes, and that is a result of the international business sector. Okay, so we have a situation where overall our revenues dropped by 10%, but corporation tax was able to rake in more than before to help offset those losses to give us a 10% net. So we should not be seeing a situation where we rest on our laurels and we turn our backs because we are now on the grey list. In December 2017, when the blacklisting started, this whole concept of listing started, there were 64 countries who were combined on the blacklist and the grey list, 17 on the black, 47 on the grey. In 2020, in October, that 64 moved to 22, 11 on the blacklist and 10 on the grey list. So there were 42 countries who have actually moved off the radar of the EU and remain compliant. And Barbados needs to be in that space, the space where we are on top of our game. We are spending time being proactive, being ahead of the conversation. We are spending time and money, which will be well spent, given the fact that this sector, amidst the whole pandemic, can actually see increase everything in excess of $200 million in revenue for the government. So to rest on our laurels and say we've made it off the blacklist, we're on the grey list, it is not good enough. We are not seeing anything in the numbers. We have not heard anything in the discussion to suggest that they have harnessed this sector good enough. In addition, we are welcoming tourists by what we would call the welcome stamp, which by the government's own making bus, and is really no longer. All it is pretty much just an Instagram page, putting posts of shops and beaches in Barbados, right? But they have done that in their own making by rushing down the normal traditional tourist dollar and not allowing for that to actually grow. But we are not seeing an international business sector that now wants to actually tap into the resources and the professional services of our middle class, of our graduates from university, to actually provide services remotely from Barbados. And so we're not seeing an innovation where we're creating even an additional revenue stream, where yes, we have businesses that come to Barbados, they're formed, they have an office, and our people go into the office and work, but where we ourselves can work remotely and give services to other jurisdictions. So we're not seeing any innovation, we're not seeing the opportunities grasped, where we can empower our people to earn an income, which will benefit the company, will be paid in foreign exchange, income tax will be earned, and we will actually have something for our graduates to do, our professionals to do, our attorneys, our accountants, our marketing execs, you name it. So the international business sector, very important to us, but we're not hearing about the exploration of this sector. We're not hearing about making sure that we don't fall back on the blacklist literally next year or the next reporting cycle. So Steve, it's very disappointing. It is business as usual for this administration. And I can see it now clearer than day that they are waiting for the airlines to be filled again to park and bring tourists to our country so that everything can remain as normal in their books.
Right. Thank you so much, Ryan. Paul, I'm asking this question not for myself, but for some of those children who walk around my house occasionally. They're not at school because they don't have any devices to get online. So I'm asking for them. We received about 100,000 vaccinations, vaccines. We gave away some. I think we got back a few. But I understand now we're up to 60,000 vaccinations that we have actually delivered, pumped into the arms of Barbadians. Now, the time between the first vaccination and the second is between 10 to 12 weeks, I understand.
Right.
Right. Would the remainder of the vaccines between the 60 and 100,000, would that include the second, I hate to call this thing jab, but this is so American, the second injection?
Yes.
Yes.
The answer to that question is, at this stage, I don't have a clue. And I'll explain why. We were told that there were 50,000 vaccines given. Mm-hmm. And we were told, which represents 50,000 people. We're to be given 145,000 vaccines. We're to vaccinate 145,000 people, approximately. Mm-hmm. We've now given about 60,000. The communique was that the Barbados government had 50,000 vaccines, and they kept in reserve another 50,000 so that in 10 to 12 weeks, you will have no issues with giving the second vaccine, which is the booster shot. We've heard no indication of getting additional vaccines from anywhere. So I'm hoping that they're not using the backups that they had to give vaccines, because they're still not sure what time the other 50,000 doses will arrive. And if that happens, it's going to be a big concern, because if you don't get that vaccine in 10 to 12 weeks, you may actually have to start your whole vaccine campaign all over again, and it would crash and burn, unfortunately. So the question is whether or not they actually have received additional vaccines. And I don't know the answer to that question, but I am concerned that they may or may not be using the backup vaccines that they had. Now, those vaccines are to be given by the end of April and early May, so that the persons can have their 12-week booster shot. And that booster shot is critical in quelling or suppressing or flattening the curve. I would also add that there was a suggestion by the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. that we vaccinate visitors, vaccinate visitors. Now, my big problem with that is that how could you be vaccinating visitors and you still have 100,000 Barbadians to vaccinate? What thinking, where's that thinking coming from? And this is my issue with the Barbados Labour Party and their ad hocism and their knee jerk. They don't take things to their furthest logical end. Like you know, some of the initiatives that they're putting in place is a big concern to me, and a big concern to many of us in the Democratic Party, and a big concern to many Barbadians. You know, the concern is that if you are going to run a vaccine campaign, you must know that you have adequate supplies to cover the Barbadians, so that you can get to the level of coverage that you desire, which is about 85 to 90%. The reality is, under 18s right now are not being able to be vaccinated because there are no studies to indicate that you can give it to a 18 or 16 or 5-year-old or whatever. Normally, on most vaccination campaigns, you vaccinate the younger demographic. But COVID has switched that entire thing on its head, where we're vaccinating the older demographic. And the issue is that we still have thousands of elderly Barbadians that have not been covered. Now, the initiative was to vaccinate the elderly in this country. And you know what? They're bungled that. There are so many elderly not vaccinated, right? And we are boasting, oh, we're vaccinating 60,000 people, but we're not vaccinating the right people, and we're not doing it fast enough and correctly. So I hear and you're boasting about how many vaccines we've given and so on, but the reality is it has to be done properly. What some jurisdictions are doing is going from 90 to 80 years old to 70 years old to 65, and that's how it is being done. We have persons where Port St. Charles had a situation where I am understanding that some of the visitors were vaccinated, and I'm hearing that and aware of that. I'm understanding that a location in Christchurch had a lot of persons that really should not have been vaccinated, and many of them were being vaccinated, but the elderly, the old people in this country are still being compromised. There's just one other issue that I'm realizing as well coming out of the estimates, and it's this matter of cancer. Cancer affects a lot of our lovely sisters or wives or friends or family in this country. And the Barbados Labour Party has sought to decrease the budget for the Barbados Cancer Society. Can you imagine that? An institution that would capture and track and make sure that we eliminate cancer out of our environment. And this is a big concern to me. This is one of the areas that they should not have done. One of the things that they should not have done. And this is grave concern. And lastly, in terms of the health response, one of the things that the Barbados Labour Party needs to do is to become creative and get ideas. They don't have one fresh, creative new idea, right? And this is very unfortunate. But I would just like to give them one, because one of the things that the Democratic Labour Party does very effectively is we don't only talk and produce Bester Santos labs and Frank Blackman Gollop and so on. We give good ideas. You see it from Ryan. You see it from Verla. You see it from our team here, from Andrea. And one of the things that we need to look at as a country is medical tourism. And I'll tell you the difference between that and just normal tourism. Barbados has beaches. It has clean facilities. It has a very good medical teams. And one of the ways that we can raise Canadian dollars, pounds, yen, euros is by having persons have the medical care here and convalesce in this beautiful country of Barbados. And it's something that I would love them to take up and run. Now, they may just totally ignore the suggestion and pick it back up in 6 months and dust it off and make it theirs, but that's okay. Because at the end of the day, we are about building this country back up. And you could always get good ideas from the Democratic Labour Party. That's what we're good at.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, time really flies when you're having fun and when you're also having intelligent conversation. We're coming to the end of our program. I want to give each of you 2 minutes just to make your closing comments, starting with Andre.
Okay, thanks, Steve. And I think we did have a very informative discussion this afternoon, but what I would say in terms of agriculture and the environment, I am not seeing in the estimates, in particular with agriculture, the passion that they want to use agriculture to take this country forward. The budget has not increased. The feed program, which was a major program in agriculture, got a budget of $2 million in the first year and only $500,000 this time around. What can $500,000 do for farmers who really want to get into the field and cultivate and produce? And with regard to the environment, we need to start talking about beautification and sweet sounding programs, but touch the harder issues that will face this country later down the road. That will be in terms of get to a proper waste disposal plan, which would include waste to energy and also desalination plants and our sewage treatment, upgrading the sewage treatment plant. So the estimates fell short to me. The debate in the lower house on the heads fell short. They dealt more with cosmetic issues and things to make them look good, but not necessarily hard-hitting issues and the burning issues that the Barbadians are feeling. We need to get people working. So many hands make light work, get the workers in the fields, into production, and not in the cabinet. Spend the money on the people of Barbados. Give Barbadians a chance to earn a living again. And that can be done through investing in agriculture and investing in the environmental projects, which will be labor intensive, which would employ a good number of Barbadians. So that will be my takeaway from today.
Thank you for so much, Andre. Ryan?
Yes, and I want to pick up from Andre. We need to get our people back out to work. People do not want to line up at the welfare office and wait on a check if it comes or if it doesn't come. They do not want to rely on a hamper that may come or may not come. They want the opportunity to earn a living for themselves and their families. And how can we do that? We need to empower the people. We need to put money in the sector of micro and small businesses. $300 million has been allocated to the BEST program. Barbados Economic Sustainability Transformation. Nowhere in there does it say tourism, yet all of this money is being allocated to tourism or tourism-related jobs. We need to get a portion of that money into entrepreneurship and micro and small enterprises in Barbados. We should not have a policy where we are only dishing out $5,000 to a small man that wants to start a little business. We have the infrastructure in fund access. We have infrastructure in the commercial banks where we can put much more on the table. And I will ask the government to consider, given the importance of the small and micro business sector, putting at least $200 million available to this sector in the next coming year and a half, as opposed to leaving it into the BEST program. Small and micro businesses, they account for 92% of businesses in Barbados, and they account for 60% of business in the employment in the private sector. The minister alluded to the fact that I employed, at one instance, 46,000 people. So why are we sidelining such an important sector in the absence of tourism? We cannot control, we are continuing to understand that we cannot and have no control over when tourism will get back to normal. So we need to work with what we have in control, and that is work with micro and small businesses. One last point, Mr. Moderator, is that the central bank reported that revenues declined by 12% last year. Well, tourism fell by 71%. and cruise sector declined by 64%. But yet revenue fell by only 12%. Where is the activity coming from? It is coming from local economy, from entrepreneurs, from small businesses, from medium businesses, from larger businesses. So if we empower the small man does not have the means to import himself directly. He has to go to the middle person or the bigger player. So everybody benefits. Big business benefits when you support from the bottom up. But when you support from the top down, it doesn't trickle down to the small man. You're talking about building houses, construction of homes, but yet you hear that a bigger contractor will get over 200 homes to construct, and the smaller contractors will get a dozen or 2 dozen. The smaller contractors will develop what you will build by the brick. They will automatically employ more persons. The bigger contractor identified will put up a slab and he will finish the job very fast. He will take home most of the profit with little impact to employment. We are in a peculiar situation where we need to drive employment. We need to get our young men focused. We need to get our young women. I understand also that maybe by the block building method, almost 15% of the workforce will be female. And we know females carry a lot in the homes as well. So where is the balance? Why are we getting 80 or 90% of the work keep going to big businesses when we can equalize the platform and bring smaller businesses into the fold? The minister was also on the platform in the by-election talking about cooperatives. But where is the talk about the cooperatives now by giving them the work? You ain't hearing the talk. So they're using the small man for their political game, but when the time comes now for these persons to actually get involved in the economy, when these guys can pick up their truck and pass by the blocks and pick up the fellas to come and do some work, a day's work, a couple of days work, we're not hearing about them. So the government has its priorities wrong. You either want to help everyone along, everyone is in it, or you want to only deal with the bigger players in this society and go nowhere. So the thing is that we need to empower people, we need to support employment and initiatives that get people to work so that the welfare, they don't have to depend on welfare, which may or may not come.
Right. Thank you so much, Ryan. Paul, I believe Ryan would have taken one of your 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, I'll just go very quickly, just to make a very quick statement.
Yes.
The Democratic Labour Party is about supporting and listening to the voice of Barbadians across the length and breadth of this country. And one group of people that we especially want to fight for at this time, and in regards to the estimates, are the nurses and the healthcare workers. They have not been paid hazard pay. And we are hoping that by next week, Tuesday, when they go to Parliament, that we would hear that funds have been assigned to make sure that just like the persons in the Ministry of Health, just like the persons at the QEH, that the wider polyclinic setting and the nurses that work and pharmacists and medical technologists that work in that environment and the maids, that they all get hazard pay. And this is something we are calling for. You can't unfair the people and expect that this thing will go away. We need to do right by the healthcare professionals that are stepping up to the plate right now in COVID. And I hope nurses hear this and respond to this call that we're making to the government of Barbados. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Madam Party Leader.
Thank you. I want to give Barbados the assurance that the Democratic Labour Party is committed to improving the lives of our people. It really does come down to that nitty-gritty. We have one natural resource, our people, and we have to do all that is in our power to protect it. And we have to do this in a deliberate way. The way that government is supposed to do that is by the interventions that are represented in the estimates. How they allocate their funds tell us what they take seriously. And I am disappointed that people continually are pushed to the side where this present administration is concerned. And I give the assurance that that is not the focus of the Democratic Labour Party. It has to be more than about just propping up elections. It has to be about presenting a package, a wholesome and a fulsome package that empowers people, that also allows for the diversification of the economy. We saw it with sugar. We're seeing it with tourism. We have to find a way to make sure that when we have these hiccups, that when we have these cyclical turns, that we also have another direction in which we can go to keep our economy flowing. And it is important that we make people the focus, because then regardless of what the movements are outside of, we will know that we have our people on our side. And when you do it the other way, instead of stimulating the economy and moving our people forward, then the only other option is austerity. And truthfully, that is what I see down the pipeline in terms of a budget to support these estimates. We have borrowed and keep borrowing at a time when our revenues are down, and it has to be paid for in some way. We need to be pressing our government and impressing on our government that their focus is out of whack, and they really do need to adjust their lenses so that they bring the focus back to the people who must be at the crux of everything that we do as a government, servicing our people. And it is really important. People have their debts that have to be paid. We need to have this focus on revenue generation, and we need to bring it home. It needs to resonate in the houses of our people. And the way to do that is to getting them back to work, working for themselves with their entrepreneurial pursuits, supported by government. And we pledge to give them that support going forward.
Thank you very much, Madam Party Leader. Well, let me thank all of you who took the time to be with us this evening on Sunday Roast, compliments of the Democratic Labour Party. We hope the discussion was enlightening and engaging, and the information imparted brought some light and clarity to the issues and concerns that confronted us on the matter of the estimates of expenditure, or any of the matters or discussants broached. On behalf of our panel, Verla De Peiza, Ryan Walters, Paul Gibson, and Andrea Worrell, I'm Steve Blackett, wishing you a very good night.